Good evening, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? No? Oh,
How about this one? No. Where's Chris?
yeah, Abby, we have no mics. They're not working.
We are having technical difficulties. Now, most of us have good loud voices, but maybe you just have to kind of speak into this. No? Okay. We're going to be putting this on YouTube if we can get it to work. Our techie fellow just left and Abigail was back up for one of their meetings. So if technology can fail, it's always at the worst time. Do, do, do you want us to test it? Okay, so we're going to call the meeting to order and thank you for your patience. I want to welcome all of you here tonight. This is a topic that we've talked about for quite some time. Tonight we have the professionals with us who will be able to answer some questions that most of us couldn't answer, and that is Brad, who works for Nuterra. So think about what you want to ask, and we will have a question and answer period sort of towards the end, I would imagine. So with this, Joe and Sonia are going to take the lead, and I'm just going to sit back and take some notes. So welcome, and please participate.
Great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking the time to join us for this session, both here in person, and we do have people joining us online via Zoom. We had promised it on YouTube. YouTube will come tomorrow. It seems like we're going to record it and have to post it because technology is great when it works. So the purpose of this session is to provide an opportunity. Well, I'm just about to do that. Yep, absolutely. So my name is Sonia Bolton. I'm the manager of community planning for the County of Frontenac, and our team provides planning services to the Township of Central Frontenac today. So joining us, as Brad mentioned, we have Brad Gaffney from Newterra. Thank you, Brad, for making the trip up here. Joe Gallivan with the County of Frontenac, and Alex Petraka is also with the county. And then we have Abby McKinnon joining us from the township as well. And also in attendance tonight, I'm going to try and not miss anybody. We have several counselors from the Township of Central Frontenac. So we have Danny Meeks, Susan Irwin, Duncan McGregor, Philip Smith, and Nikki Gowdy. Did I miss anybody? No? Okay. Great, wonderful. So as I said, the purpose of this session is to provide an opportunity to learn more about communal services and to basically start a conversation in the community about how the township could be using this technology moving forward. Some of you have probably heard of communal services mentioned in conjunction with the former school site. But tonight and future conversations, this is about more than just the school site. It's about the township as a whole. So I've got a couple of housekeeping items to review, but first I wanted to share the land acknowledgement that the township has that we are gathering tonight. And we begin by acknowledging that the land on which we are gathering is the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Nation. So I just wanted to note as well, if you want to receive notices about any future meetings or reports about this subject, to please sign the sign-in sheets that are by the door there, because we can be sending updates to you if you want to stay in touch about that. We are being joined online via the Zoom platform. And so for those of us that are joining online, they can only hear us when the mics are being used. So what that means, unfortunately, when we get to sort of the question and answer session, if you do have a question, we'll have to ask you to come up. We've got another microphone set up there for you to use, or I can repeat your question if that's easier for you than coming up front. I think that's almost it. Yeah, just a friendly reminder to mute your phones and devices. Please feel free to step out if you have to take a call. For those people who are joining us online through Zoom, you can use the raise hand feature on Zoom, or if you're on your phone, you can dial *9 to raise your hand. Any questions about the process for tonight? Our intent is to provide you with a presentation that might run about 45 minutes or so, and we'll have time at the end for discussions and questions. If there's any burning questions along the way, please feel free to ask, but it might run a little bit more as sort of seamless for the folks online if we can wait till the end. Okay? So with that, Abby, do you mind sharing the presentation? Great, thank you. And I'm just going to test that my remote changer works. All right, something technological that's working well tonight. Yay, okay. So just a bit of an outline about what we're going to talk about tonight. First of all, we're going to start off by talking what are communal services, because many people have not heard about them. I'll talk a little bit about why the County of Frontenac has chosen to pursue this review about communal services and its use going forward, and about how it's led to the creation of a public utility known now as Frontenac Municipal Services. I'll turn it over to Brad, who is actually here to talk about the technology itself and how it works. And then our last few slides are going to circle back, and we're going to talk about how we use this from a land use planning perspective and a community building perspective, and the kinds of things that Central Frontenac needs to think about how it could use this technology in the future. So to start off, in terms of what communal services are, so communal services are basically their shared drinking water and sewage systems that provide water and wastewater treatment to a cluster of residences or businesses. They're also sometimes referred to as decentralized services. They operate on the same basic principles as your traditional or conventional municipal treatment plants. But they're not connected to a large single facility. So instead, they're called right-sized facilities that treat water and wastewater close to where it is needed or created. Communal services can be less expensive than centralized municipal services, and it reduces the cost of needing to pipe water or wastewater over long distances. They are also more environmentally friendly than your traditional private on-site services, such as an individual septic system. So why pursue it? So this quote here comes from the County of Frontenac's official plan, and that is that the lack of municipal services in our villages challenges the future community viability of those villages. So in our villages, we don't have any traditional municipal water or sewer services, save one exception. The village of Sydenham does have piped water, and that came about because of an order from the Ministry of Environment about 25 years ago. But that's the only sort of piped service that we have anywhere currently in Frontenac. Our historic settlement areas, so our villages and our hamlets, we have building lots like here in Charlotte Lake that are very small. But the modern standard today for a new house and a well and a septic system is to have it on a lot that is at least 2 acres in size. So that's 0.8 of a hectare. Our villages and our hamlets are also where a lot of our commercial assessment, all of our businesses are located, and a lot of our community services, such as our schools, our medical centers. And to do traditional municipal services would be a significant public infrastructure investment that honestly, it's too much for our townships to be able to afford those traditional services. So the county, over the course of the last 9 years, has been looking into the issue of communal services and reviewing the technology, the policies, the regulations, and the governance models that can be used in order to see whether we can leverage this as something that we use as a tool to help build and sustain our communities. So some of the advantages, communal services allows you to be able to develop on smaller lots, which is a better fit when you're looking at infill or redevelopment or new development within villages and hamlets. It helps to strengthen the local economy by supporting businesses as well as other community infrastructure like our schools. By keeping things a bit more dense, and you end up with more sort of compact, walkable communities. And it also opens the door for different types of housing. Right now, when you develop on private services, generally what gets developed are single detached dwellings, which is fine, but when that's the only choice you have, people lose out on the option of having other options for housing, such as townhomes, small apartments, and so communal services, particularly in villages and hamlets, can make that possible. In terms of the environmental advantages, and Brad will speak to this in more detail, but from what we have found that there are better environmental and public health protections in place with communal services than there are with private on-site services. So there's fewer malfunctions, longer life to the system, and with regular maintenance, you're looking at things like measuring the performance, monitoring impacts, fixing problems early. So this might be a little difficult to see. I'm going to describe it in a bit more detail, but on the left is a diagram of a subdivision that is near Inverary. It is approved, and I don't know if it's mostly built, but it's at least partially built. And it's a traditional estate lot development with 16 single detached dwellings on lots that are approximately 1.5 acres in size. They had to do some extra studies to prove that they could build and have septic systems on less than 2 acres. And the green rectangles that you see in that left picture, those are the septic beds, not the houses. So when the county was working with the consultant, we hired that communal services study that I mentioned. We worked with a consulting group called WSP, and we said to them, If you took this development as it is, what could you build if you built everything on communal services instead of individual septic systems? And what they came up with is on the right-hand side. So with that, there'd be a mixed-use development with a commercial block. So the commercial block is right near the main street. It's in sort of the purpley pink color. There are 41 singles, single detached, those are the light brown, 9 townhomes, those are in orange along the back, and then a 12-unit apartment building in red in the lower left corner. So a significant total number of 62 units as opposed to the 16 that were there before, which is what is possible just through using communal services. And in the top right-hand corner, on the right-hand side, that is where the communal septic field and septic system would be located for that entire development. So that's just an example that we use based on a real-life site and development in terms of how could we redevelop it on communal services. So essentially, in terms of how it all works, there's really, I think, three main pieces. The first one is governance and operations. So how is this all working? Who is watching over it? Who is looking after everything and taking care of everything? There's the technology itself, which Brad will speak to. And then there's the land use planning. How do you want to use it in your community? Where do you want to use it? What do you want to get out of it? What types of housing do you want to get out of? So these are sort of the three main pieces that we're going to touch on in the remainder of the presentation. So the first one, in terms of governance structure, that there was a second part to the study that the county worked on with WSP, and that was looking at what is the best way to oversee how this could be done in our community. And what they ended up with in terms of their top recommendation was the use of a municipal service corporation. And the reason for that is this, as Brad will explain, the technology for this has been around a long time. It just hasn't been used very often in Ontario yet. Because what happens is when a private developer comes and wants to build with communal services, particularly when it involves permanent residential homes, the province requires what is called a municipal responsibility agreement, or an MRA. So they're required when the development is going to be privately owned and operated, and they're basically a legal agreement between the municipality and the developer or the site owner. And the site owner could be one person, it could be a condo corporation of people. And basically what it is, it provides oversight at the municipal level for how everything is going to operate. It basically means if the developer walks away or the system fails, the municipality will step in and they will take care of everything. Most municipalities don't want to do this because they can't afford to do it. So what they do is they say to the developer, okay, we will do this, we will sign this agreement, but if your system costs $1 million, then we want $1 million in securities to keep in the bank because that's the only way we can step in and help if we have to. And the developer says, well, you just doubled the cost of my development and I can't afford to do this anymore, so thank you, and they walk away. So with the Municipal Service Corporation, which is the route that Frontenac County decided to go through, it is essentially a corporation in and of itself. So if you're familiar with the City of Kingston at all, the City of Kingston has Utilities Kingston. So the council of the City of Kingston is the board of directors for Utilities Kingston, but they are two separate legal entities under the law. So by using a municipal service corporation, you get to be able to have these types of services, which helps align with long-term growth for the community so that you can grow within your villages and have other housing options. It allows for consistency all across the region. So it's not like one township in Frontenac is doing something that the others can't do. It separates finances. So the budget for the townships is different from the budgets for the utility corporation. It allows for profits and profit sharing. Now, the corporation's only 2 years old, not even at this point, so there's not a lot of profits right away, but the idea is that eventually profits will be generated. The shareholders, who are the townships, will then be able to receive those monies and be able to reinvest those for the benefit of their communities. It can limit political influence by having it be a separate body. And the services in the corporation remain 100% publicly owned by the participating municipalities. So what we have I apologize. I'm changing two different slides here and I'm not keeping up. My apologies, everybody. Okay. So the regional public utility that was formed, a municipal service corporation by the name of Frontenac Municipal Services, is now what is in place across Frontenac. And they have, in the last little while, they've hired an operator. So it is a company called Clearford, who have experience all across Ontario and other areas of the country as well in terms of operating and managing these systems. So I'm going to remember to turn my slides this time. So in terms of where we are now with Frontenac Municipal Services, all 4 townships and the county have joined this public municipal utility. It was officially incorporated by the province in November 2023. It has a board of directors, and it also has a technical working group that are working on best practices to get the utility up and running. The county of Frontenac amended its official plan, which is an official plan is like a community's blueprint for how you're going to grow and develop over time. It was amended to recognize communal services, and now it's the turn for the townships to look at amending their official plans to recognize communal services. And that's what this conversation is about starting those discussions about how you want to use that technology and where in your community going forward. So now I think I'm going to turn it over to Brad. Yeah, just the right arrow.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Great. Thank you for having me. It's an honor. Joe and Sonia and Fran, thank you for having me in. It's been, I've been with Nuterra. We're a water treatment company. Actually, we're an environmental company first, but we're focused on water treatment. So I'm an engineer there. I've been there for about 21 years, building water treatment equipment. So I was inspired a little bit when I first started Nuterra with the fact that water is been around for quite a few years, about 4.5 billion. There's not new water. We only have what's here as far as fresh water goes. So keeping it clean is a very important part of what we need to do for our future generations. And Nuterra has over the years grown through different verticals of treating water, whether it's contaminated groundwater from a gas station that spilled oil or gas into the water aquifer, and we pull it out and we separate the oil and water and clean it. To all the way to sewage treatment, reusable water for certain applications of food and beverage industrial applications. But today, I'm going to talk a bit about sewage treatment and the technology MBR. So it stands for something called membrane bioreactor. So as an engineer, I can just see people start to glaze over. I'll try to minimize the boringness of it and move quickly through it. So, but if there are further questions after, I'll stick around and happy to talk about those. There we go. So we're not far away. Brockville, Ontario, we have about 140,000 square foot manufacturing facility where we have about 100 folks there that work engineering and manufacturing water treatment systems. As I said, different types. Most of our sewage treatment systems are built there right in this factory. We have 4 other factories in North America. So we've grown over the years. I started in '92 and right here in Brockville, right at that location. And we've expanded quite a bit over the years globally. We do quite a bit of work in Ontario and as well throughout Canada. In the group, in the Brockville group, we have a number of engineers, multiple disciplines, and we have a whole bunch of civil, mechanical, plumbers, electricians that are building this equipment. We've been doing this for a while, and as you can imagine, over years, companies acquire other companies in water, which we've done. We've accumulated a lot of installations, a little over 10,000 or 20,000 actually installations globally. And we have about over 100 installations in Canada with sewage treatment, the one I'm going to talk about today, and double that in the US. So the challenge or the problem in Ontario specifically is we've had a surge in population. We have all kinds of water infrastructure that's designed around centralized water treatment. And what that means is you have one wastewater plant, as Sonia alluded to. We have in Kingston, there's a wastewater plant, and there's pipes that go out and they collect all the wastewater and they bring it back to that plant, and then it treats it and discharges it to Lake Ontario. So that's what we call a centralized infrastructure. And our province is set up for that. Unfortunately, we're growing at a fast rate, and it's very expensive to expand and grow centralized infrastructure, which is why decentralized, as Sonia was saying, or communal, another way to say it, is another tool in our toolbox for Ontario to help us maintain growth and build out the province. And the nice thing about being able to have decentralized in Ontario, we have lots of beautiful places to live, and it would be really nice to be able to live in a community like this and be able to grow and have affordable homes for our future generations. I mentioned we have a lot of installations. So these are our sewage and some are drinking water systems, most of them are sewage. So we have over 40 ECAs. It's an acronym that I'll touch on real quickly, but it stands for Environmental Compliance Agreement. And that's regulated by the province. So basically it's a permit to have one of these plants put on a site where you can treat the water and create a very clean, reusable effluent that goes back into the environment. And there's lots of rules and regulations around that and how those permits are given out and how you can achieve to get one. These systems can be owned by a community, by a municipal corporation, by a private developer, a condo corp. So it does vary on ownership. There's lots of options there. Getting where the mouse is. Oh, is it there? Where do I shoot for this?
There's a box right under the screen.
Need a laser.
Frozen.
Can you force it forward? There we go. I throw this picture in just to give you a little idea of flow. So it's important to understand what we're talking about when we're talking about communal systems. So these are not mega plants. These are not $100 million wastewater treatment plants that are going to service the city of Kingston or Brockville. This technology has been around for decades. Actually, the technology I'm going to talk about today has invented in 1960. Became mainstream in municipal wastewater throughout the 90s. And what Nuterra decided is that there's a need for this technology in smaller communities and smaller flows. So we cover a range of flow of anywhere from as small as 10 homes up to 10,000 homes. So that's sort of the range of technology, the range of flow that we work within. So we've taken an existing technology that's been proven, is in operation today globally. It's accepted by regulators globally, and I'll get into the reasons why. And basically we've just scaled it down and put it in a smaller footprint and made these to be built in a factory so that we can ship them out and modularly put them together so that they can scale up with the developments as communities grow over time. Instead of going in and building a $100 million plant, you can put in a small section of a plant and then add sections as years go by to grow that as the community grows and houses are getting built. Working out. So this is a picture of a 500 home MBR wastewater treatment plant, and it's located in London, near London, Ontario. So there's a township called Southold Township, and there's a brand new development of 500 homes. This system sits down in a valley, and it's got a footprint of about 40 feet by 60 feet, plus it's got the little generator off to the side. And then there's a creek, but you can't see it off to the right of the screen. And that creek works its way to Dodge Creek, and then it goes out to Lake Erie. So what happens is the 500 homes have a traditional collection system. You flush the toilet, it goes through a drain, and it comes into the system into a tank. And from there, we take that wastewater, that sewage, and we treat it, and we turn it to reusable clean water that literally looks like that. And we discharge it back into the environment, into the waterways, and it's actually cleaner than the waterways. The advantages of these package systems being built, as I said, is that they're scalable. It goes together in a few weeks because it's built in a factory, and they are very cost effective when you compare them to septic and well. Not well, because this is sewage, but septic systems. Now you might ask, what makes these systems robust? What what's gonna happen if something breaks or discharge sewage to my precious waterways? Well, that is something that's not acceptable. And the way that is ensured is multiple levels. So at the very top, we have the province. So we have the Ministry of Environment, so the MECP. So that's the Ministry of Conservation and Parks. And they issue something called environmental compliance approvals for these facilities. Every single facility in Ontario has its own environmental compliance approval, and one can't be installed without getting that permit. It takes over a year to get the permit. And what the permit does, it dictates what the water is going to be, what flow rates of water. So how many homes, are we talking 10 homes? Are we talking 500 homes? What are you using? What technology are you using to treat the water? Because I'm talking about one technology, and I'm actually talking about the best available technology on the market, not because it's Nuterra, of course it is, but MBR is not Nuterra's technology. This is a generic technology that's been around for decades, as I said, but we've adopted it and we've put it in a smaller form factor. But if you ask any regulator globally, I don't care if you go to the US, to California, if you come to Ontario, or if you go to Singapore, they will tell you MBR is the best available technology for treating sewage, period. And the reason it's the best is its effluent quality. Sorry, I wasn't supposed to say that word. It's the output of our system. And as an engineer, I always say technical words that I don't mean, but basically the output being the water that we're treating as clean water that we're putting back in the environment. And that's what the ECA determines of what that quality of water has to be, where it's going to go, whether it has a generator, lots of details that are in that. Even goes to the level of how it's operated, meaning that if a company like Clearford or if the municipal corporation is operating the plant, what they need to do on a weekly basis, what reports they need to do on a weekly basis, what tests they need to take, and when their annual reports have to go back. And this is all monitored at the provincial level. And then Clearford, or the operating company, the municipal corporation, will have an operator of record assigned to this facility. So they are legally bound, and these are professionals that are trained, and they are the operators of record, and they're the ones, their names are on the ticket, and they're the ones that are responsible for ensuring all the reporting and everything that goes in that's asked for by that ECA. So that's what these are. That's the approval side of things. I'll talk about all the protection on the equipment side shortly. But let's get into the technology. So what is MBR? Membrane bioreactor. So the acronym is a bit backwards from a process standpoint. The membrane is the last part of the process, but the bioreactor is first. So there's three main advantages of MBR.
Sorry, my slides aren't appearing correctly, but no, it's not you. Keep going.
Okay. The first is effluent quality. Now, we picked MBR in the early 2000s because we knew it was best available technology then. Regulations didn't require it. We could have used a lagoon, you could have used an oxidation dish, you could have used an extended aeration plant. I'm naming off things that if you're not into wastewater, you might not know what that is. But these are all subpar technologies of what MBR is. So MBR giving you the highest output. We said, we're going to go with that. As engineers, we knew we could make it better. Because at the time, they used more energy. They had, more complexities to them. But as we grew over the 20 years, and we did work in the Arctic, we do work in the North in Baffin Island, we do work with First Nations communities, we do work throughout the globe in Africa. We were able to, refine that process and improve the technology so that you can maintain and get rid of all those disadvantages that MBR had back then, which are not valid today. They have a small footprint and they're scalable. So that was the key. So being able to scale these up as housing developments go and align capital costs, the cost of that plant, so that it doesn't burden the new homes that are being built today. And then when you do build more homes later, that cost to build those new homes is still aligns with that new phasing of the next part of the development. The process is very simple. We start with the first thing you do when you flush the toilet, all your toiletries go down. It goes into a tank, and then sometimes it goes into something called a screening process. So what we'll do is we use a mechanical screen and we remove all the toiletries, all the inorganics, things that aren't going to break down, shoes, believe it or not, T-shirts, we get it all. But we remove all those first. And then you're left with sewage water. So it's, as you would expect. Then that goes in that equalization tank, and that goes up and down with the flows of the day. So as people in the morning are using lots of water, having showers, making breakfast, that tank is designed to fill and not overfill for those peak times. So we design that based on the flow because we know that before we built the plant. The next stage is we move that water to a biological reactor. That tank always stays full. It takes about 8 to 12 hours for the drop of water to move from the entire process from the front end all the way to the back end. And part of that is because this is Mother Nature doing her part as the way they break down the sewage. So in the biological reactor, we use bubbles. When you use small bubbles, we can put oxygen in the water. And bugs in the water, they're naturally in our stomach, they're in the sewage, they are there. They activate and become active when there's activity. So the bubbles put oxygen in. If we have 2 parts per million, that's just a measurement of how much oxygen that you can measure that's in the water. They're very happy. They also like warm temperatures, anything above 12 degrees Celsius. Warmer the better, just like us. They also like a balanced pH, so it can't be too acidic. So we control those 3 main parameters in this biological reactor. And while the bugs are happy and active, they're eating and they're breaking down that sewage. And we get that, what we call a mixed liquor, but for a better way to say it, I always say it looks like a dark chocolate milk, like protein chocolate milk kind of stuff you can get. My son's a runner, so that's what he drinks. But it doesn't taste like that, but it looks like that. So what we do then is we move it from that tank to the smaller tank that's got these guys in it. And this is where the magic happens. So
I'm gonna hand them out while you.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, sure. So I'm going to pretend I have one in my hand, but no, I don't need one. No, I got a pen. We're good. So when you look at this, it's a fiber. It's called a hollow fiber, and think of it as a straw. And I think those are the clean ones, so you should be okay. I'm just kidding. They are the clean ones. They're actually from that one. But it's a straw, and it's hollow inside, as you would expect a straw to be, and it works exactly the same as a straw. A couple of small differences. Instead of when you put a vacuum, like when you suck on a straw, you pull liquid through the bottom of the straw and up through the hollow of it. What we do is these membranes are plugged on the bottom, and then they're all connected together at the top. And then the wall of the straw has very, very tiny holes in it, 0.04 micron holes. If you see that blue arrow at the bottom right corner, it's pointing to a dot. It's not exactly representative, but it gives you an idea of how small that hole is compared to bacterias, viruses, microplastics, some pharmaceuticals, combustible particles, all kinds of stuff that we don't want to have in our waterways. So in order for a drop of water to get past this membrane, it has to go through that tiny hole into the hollow of the straw as it's being sucked out, and then out through to the river or the stream that it's going to. With that, you are left with a very clean output that is reusable to the extent that you could actually take it to the next level of polishing it. This is what it looks like. That's the dark chocolate milk on the left side. Those are all the measurements that you could measure wastewater, things like biological oxygen demand or total suspended solids and total ammonia nitrogen or total nitrogen, total phosphorus. Phosphorus, you might have heard, is not one that we want in our waterways. So this system is this membrane is able to reject all that. Oops. To the point that we went to a toilet to tap demonstration at the plant. So on the top picture, you can see on the top right picture, there's a picture of a small packaged plant there. That's an MBR that's got this membrane in it. We took all the sewage. You've seen the picture of our plant. We have about 100 folks there. They were using the toilets. I contributed to this. And they put it into this plant. We treated it. We put it through something called a reverse osmosis. You might have one under your kitchen sink. That's what I was saying. I say polish. That's what I mean. We just polish it. And then we had our board of directors drink it. And I know they are still all good. So from a technology standpoint, it exists to take water, wastewater, sewage, and turn it into reusable clean water. Now, obviously, drinking it, unless you're on a space station, we wouldn't go to that level, but you can. The systems are small. They are very compact. They're scalable, as I said, and this is what one looks like on the inside. So the top picture where the 4 is between those two, that's where the membrane is sitting. So it's sitting in a couple stainless steel tanks. And then there's a tank in the ground, that equalization tank I showed you up start, but that's where that up and down, where everybody's using lots of water in the mornings. The middle tank, that's where the bugs are, the chocolate milk mixed liquor, that's where all the magic happens from Mother Nature. And then a question you usually get asked, and I'll probably head it off here if someone was gonna ask it, but what happens when all the stuff that you pulled the clean water out, but you left all the other stuff behind? Well, that's what we call sludge. So we got to move that out of the system. So what happens is the bugs die. There's also the microplastics and all the nasty stuff we don't want in our waterway. We move that to a small tank in box corner number 6. It says sludge holding tank. And then what we do is we decant that. We basically just dewater. We take the decanted water, we put it back into the front end of the system, and we thicken that up, and eventually it becomes this, thicker sludge. And then what we do is we put it through a digesting process that allows it to become inert, and then it can be used as fertilizer or go to a municipal plant. So that gets hauled away. So really, the only output of this plant is clean water, and the rest of it gets hauled away to either landfill fertilizer for farms, and other applications can be right to a wastewater plant, like a municipality. But it only has to be hauled away once every 30 days, roughly. Quinte West, we have 2 500-home plants there, owned and operated by the municipality of Quinte West. This is a picture of the Stonecrest system. So you can see those stainless steel tanks on the right side. That's the one that has the membranes in it. The downward picture in the middle is, just the plant. It's in a traditional Butler building. And then there's some tanks in the ground on the one side. And then you see a couple of pictures below. Those are just equipment on skids that we put inside the building. Same concept, same idea, but essentially the developer came in, said, we want to build 500 homes. Quinte West said, we don't have the capacity. You couldn't even run the pipe. It cost you $20 million to run the pipe. We put this plan in for a fraction of that, and the developer bought it and gave it over to the municipality. The municipality now runs it as a utility. They have now 500 homes to collect taxes from, and they also have a wastewater plant that's been running for 7 years. Same idea. This one's in actually St. Thomas. It's a Amazon warehouse. So Amazon's got about 1,500 people working in this warehouse. Same situation. They didn't have servicing. So we were able to put down a system that was able to service the plant, and it handles all the different peaks and variations, because you imagine Christmas time, there's a lot more workers. This one's in Lake Muskoka. So that is actually Lake Muskoka, and we're discharging into it. The water that's coming out of this plant, as I said, is cleaner than Lake Muskoka. This one's it's in Quinte area as well, or Consacon, I guess. So it's a RV or mobile home park, and it's been in operation for a number of years, I think 2015. There we go. So process-wise, I mean, not process, but just from a system, having all the permitting in place, having a system designed and built and set up on the facility, and then fabricating and in startup. It is a very short process compared to what a traditional build would be if you were building something that was a mega plant, all within a year or two at the most. And then ongoing operations. So these systems are designed for 35, 40-year lives. So they are all stainless steel. There's nothing magical in these systems. The most unusual part is the membrane itself. All the pumps, there's small little pumps. There's everything that you go in there, you could use your phone and Google it and find that part and order it yourself. There's nothing magical inside these boxes. We've just gotten really good at designing and packaging them up so that they operate and last a long, long time. And operation companies like Clearford and as utility corps come online, we'll be able to operate them very easily. They have telemetry in them. They're easy to get information and data. I think that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Brad. We just got a few more slides here. I just want to talk again about from the land use planning and the community building perspective. I mean, for us, communal services really is an opportunity to do sustainable rural community building, particularly for our villages and hamlets, because we know that in order to, you can't even do any infill or any additional residential units on the small lots in the villages because of the existing servicing. And so there is opportunity for our villages. The first example I'll reference here is the housing master plan that was done for Verona, so just a little ways down the road. This is being led by South Frontenac Township themselves. It is a mix of townhouses and apartment buildings, and they are looking at having anywhere from 70 to 100 units. The final number will depend on the design and the servicing capacity that they have to figure out through the environmental approval process, and they are in the final stages of that process. The other example I was going to share is probably very familiar to people in the room. It's the Sharper Lake School site, which is basically next door here. So it's a 2-acre site right here in the heart of the village. I know the township had purchased it with the intent of doing seniors housing and having 8 to 10 units using the existing well and septic. As the county was working on the communal services study, we said, what if we use communal services? So we worked with the township and got funding from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities to do what's called a feasibility study. And some of you may have been, present for that presentation, but that study determined that using communal services, you could have anywhere from 45 to 50 apartments units on that site. What is shown here at the time, we asked the consultant, can you give us just some rough conceptual ideas of what that could look like? And they had 2 options. There was one larger 3-story building, and this option was the 2 3-story buildings. I will say right now, no decisions have been made about Charlotte Lake. There's still technical work that needs to be done, decisions to be made by council. But this is an opportunity for Charlotte Lake to be able to utilize communal services to the benefit of the community in the future. So in terms of our official plan policies, like I mentioned, the official plan that a municipality has is basically your blueprint for how you're going to grow. At the county level, we amended our official plan to talk about communal services and to provide direction to the township. So the first thing that we had said is any new residential subdivisions, so actual neighborhoods that are going to be in hamlets and villages, need to be on communal services wherever feasible to be able to achieve a compatible density and to fit in with the villages. Townships can consider using communal services to service existing villages and hamlets, including doing any kind of Main Street improvements. And we also want it to be the primary servicing method for any new large-scale commercial or industrial developments, as well as any business parks. So that's another development opportunity that we haven't seen much of, was where you have a business park and a collection of businesses, because again, everybody has different servicing needs. Being able to do it through communal services offers up an opportunity to do some different business type developments than what we've had in the past as well. So in terms of the township official plan and the conversation we want to start in the community, there are a number of things that we have to address, and these are the kinds of things that we want people to start thinking about in terms of how you want to use this, right? So are you going to use these for your hamlets and villages? Is it something you would want in all of your hamlets, or maybe just some of them? If so, which ones and why? How would you use communal services to create new forms of housing? And what kind of scale and density and how big and what forms of housing? Apartments, if so, how big of an apartment? So there's all that scale, but how this new housing could fit into the existing community. Would you want to be able to use communal services in a rural area for a rural subdivision? And if so, again, what would you want it to look like? One of the things that, we want to be prepared for is if somebody walks in the door one day and says, well, I have 100 acres, I'd like to build 300 homes. And then that's bigger than most of your villages and hamlets. Is that something the township would be willing to entertain? And if so, what would need to be done by that developer? Would you want to see it used for waterfront developments? If so, in what cases? On all lakes potentially, or only on some lakes, or are some lakes not okay? So there's that conversation to have about, is it of a benefit, rather to have some areas, perhaps rather than having them densely populated with everybody having their own septic, is there an environmental benefit to having everybody on a communal system, and the system is set quite a ways away from the lake? And then the other conversation too to have is what would somebody have to do? What are the plans and studies and all of the criteria and approval systems that they would be required to do to demonstrate that communal services are appropriate for what they're proposing, and that they have to prove that there's going to be no negative impact environmentally and to the community? So that is the last slide. That is the formal presentation. Some of the slides, I apologize, the resolution, which the text was showing up, it's still showing up a little bit strange here, but we are going to put a PDF of all of these slides on the website that you see there, the Engage Frontenac site. If you signed up, I'll send out an email when everything's ready in terms of the presentation slides and the YouTube link and everything. But at this point, if there are questions, actually, I have a question that I'm going to ask Brad first, if I can, because I think if I don't, somebody else is going to ask it. And that is, what if something happens and the system fails? What happens to the lakes and all the private wells that might be around it? Like, what's the risk?
So as I said, the membrane is that physical barrier between the sewage and the environment. And one of the reasons why it's seen by regulators, which are environmental protection regulators, as best available technology, is it doesn't allow it to go anywhere but through that. There is no bypass valve. Large municipalities, they get high rain events. Guess what happens? They got a valve. They have to write a letter and big report, but it goes out to Lake Ontario as a version of raw sewage. That can't happen with these. It has to go through the membrane. There is no short circuit. Your backup plan. So before we get to the backup plan, from a design and engineering standpoint, there's redundant pumps. So there's 2 pumps for every pump. So if one pump, the other one comes on, and there's a shelf spare, by the way. Everything's died in telemetry, text messages on alarm, all come out to the operator of record, as I said, who is responsible, and they have a crew of people that tend to these plants. And if all of that fails and the generator stopped or something unfortunate happened, the plant would not produce output, and the result would have to be hauling. So a truck would need to come in and haul the sewage away. That's the only option.
So too, like I said, we're happy if people have questions. Again, if you're online, you can use the raise hand function through Zoom. And if you're watching, excuse me, on Zoom on your phone, I believe it's *9 in order to raise your hand. And then also if there's anybody here, if you're able to, it'd be great if you could come up and use the microphone. If you don't want to or aren't able to, if you want to yell out your question, I can at least hopefully rephrase it or like repeat it properly so that people can hear it online. Any question? Yeah. Oh. Okay. Just press the button till the light turns green.
I'm Ken Waller. I'm here on behalf of the Charlotte Lake Property Owners Association, who have a great desire to see the lake remain as good as it possibly can. Is this a panacea for development that it appears to be? And what is the response of the province to the installation? Are they, I mean, what you present seems to be the best of any world possible. And if someone's willing to put it in, is that a blanket acceptance by the province?
So I almost said through you, Madam Mayor. I'll take a stab at that, and then Brad or Joe, feel free to step in. So right now, we feel one of the challenges that we have solved is through the use of the public utility. Our next challenge is actually at the provincial level itself with its environmental approvals. So right now, the environmental approvals process for a sewage treatment plant, if it's publicly owned, is the same no matter if you're treating 30 homes or 300,000 homes. And it's a process that takes 4 to 5 years and close to $500,000. And so the problem is most developers aren't going to tie up that much money in that lengthy of a process to do that. So we are working with the province to try and see if this is something that they would consider. It's not that we want to bypass the environmental approvals process, but we feel the approvals process needs to be changed to address the scale of what is actually being proposed. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything, Joe, if you want to add.
That's a very good question, Ken, because I think Brad has shown how good the technology is. And there's been two reasons why. I mean, I've been working on this for almost a decade, and I've learned there's two reasons why these aren't more prevalent in Ontario. So Sonia mentioned the thing called the Municipal Responsibility Agreement, which is essentially a contract between a municipality and a developer, that if the system fails, and I think Brad has shown tonight, the chance of a failure is not very high with these systems, that, or the developer bankrupts or walks away, that the rules are correct because the province is saying we don't want the environment to be damaged or people to have health risks, so you've got to take the system over. But for places like Central Frontenac, in fact, all 4 townships in Frontenac County, there's not enough money in the bank to let them sign a contract that says you don't have to give us any money. As Sonia says, the developers have to double down, and that is a real burden. With the utility that Frontenac has set up, and this is the first jurisdiction in Ontario that has this utility for these systems, it will take the system over. The developer will pay to build the system. The utility will monitor the installation, make sure it's built the right way, and Brad can talk to you more importantly about why it needs to be built right out of the gate. And then we manage it. But the developer doesn't have to worry about fixing it or anything. It's the utility will take that over. So the contract is not necessary anymore. That's a big step forward. The other part is the environmental approvals that Sonia has just spoken about. So the utility right now, and the president of the utility sitting right here beside me, by the way, is working on best practices. So for example, one of the things they're looking at is there 2 or 3 or 4 of these systems, sort of like Nuterra, that we want to stamp that we like? And those 3 or 4 systems are what we want to see built in Frontenac. If a developer comes in and he wants to do something different, he's going to have to really prove it's going to work. But I think the developers will like that. They'll know that, oh, if I use this, you're going to support it. So that's good. And also they're going to be making sure that they're well operated. So we're doing that right now. But those 2 big obstacles are the reasons why there's not many of these systems in Ontario. And if we get the environmental approvals streamlined, recognizing in Frontenac, we're never going to have a 500-unit subdivision here. And as Sonia said, the whole reason we did this was about community building. So in the Charlotte Lake case, for example, the feasibility study said this type of technology is good for all the reasons that Brad has laid out. But not only that, council can have a conversation with the village to say, maybe it's not just a school site we want to service. We could service other properties like this building here tonight to help make sure that this is all going to work well in the next 100 years. So the technology is a non-starter. But it's interesting. I've learned that the planning world hasn't learned much about this. It's only since Frontenac has started this that the ears have picked up on this. And it is our future in Frontenac, I think. Yes.
In the past, there was an attempt to do a group housing with a common setup just south of the bridge. And the developer gave up in disgust after the route he had to follow. This system seems to be a drop-in, plug-in system that is already approved. The environmental monitoring on the input stage leading up to it and the output stage exiting it seem to be the areas that would only have to be covered, plus or minus the interaction between them. Is that a fair assessment?
I'll use my analogy, my truck analogy, and then. So, and Brad will confirm this. MECP, Ministry of the Environment, knows exactly what Nuterra is and what they build and the quality of the build. And I'll let you talk about that in a second. What we've been saying to the province is, look, we can't make developers, private sector developers, come in here to build 100 homes, put them through a 5-year environmental approval process and spend more than $500,000 where they could invest in the stock market. They can invest in other things other than community building. So you've got to speed the process up. And the analogy we use is, look, for example, with Nuterra, you know exactly how it works. Just like General Motors designing a new truck, and they take that design to Transport Canada. and Transport Canada approves the gas efficiency, the crash tests and everything, and they stamp that truck's good to go, and then they go back to Oshawa and roll thousands of them off the plant line. Our argument is, if you know that in Frontenac we're only going to use 2 or 3 of these systems, and you know exactly how they work, then why are you going to make us go through the same thing over and over again? And I'm going to turn it over to you, Brad.
Sure. Yeah, I like that analogy, but you don't want to crash your truck before you get it. But the reality is the process what the Ministry of Environment has created is a good one, and it's robust, but it's designed for centralized wastewater treatment. So it's designed for the mega plants. You're putting in a $100 million plant, you definitely need a 5-year process to evaluate all the parts and pieces. And think about the flow. You're talking about millions of gallons of water per day, tens of millions. So when our conversations with the Ministry of Environment is they know this technology. They know exactly what it can do. We've proven beyond what they know it can do, and they've accepted some of our piloting data. But the reality is there's only so many sensitive receivers in, so if you're familiar with the different types of receivers, a Policy 2 receiver in Ontario is probably one of the most strict receivers. From a phosphorus standpoint, it's 0.03 parts per million or milligrams per liter. That is very strict. This technology can exceed that. And they know that. So if what we're really looking from the Ministry of Environment isn't, we don't want to be relaxed. We want them to tighten. Give us the worst case. Give us the Policy 2 receiver, and we'll meet that effluent every day. So that's really what we're pushing for. We're not looking to relax it. Now, there's other technologies out there that can't hit this level of effluent. And those are the technologies that the ministry wants to evaluate and say, well, wait a minute, where are you putting this water? Let's go into a wetlands. Okay, and phosphorus could probably be maybe 1 milligram per liter, not 0.03. So those are the considerations that the ministry is doing because they treat every site differently, which I think is okay. We just need to, that first process just needs to be a bit more streamlined for the size of plant that we're dealing with.
Is there a minimum number of units below which this 5-year process is not required?
So under the building code, 10,000 liters, which is 10 cubic meters per day, that is where you can use a septic system or a communal septic system, or there are some technologies that are approved under the building code. So we don't do anything under the building code. That flow is too low for what we offer. We do more of the communal side. So anything above 10,000 liters per day or 10 cubic meters per day, which is the same thing.
Yeah, generally, I just to add to that, so that's about 5 homes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's about 5 homes, right? So I think you were saying you could do it for as little, these communities for as little as 10. Now, is 10 financially viable for a developer who's looking at building a bunch of homes? Maybe, maybe not. But I think, like Joe said, we're not going to see somebody roll in here and want to build 500 homes in one place. That's just not how we're growing, right?
But a developer who wants to build 5 homes, is it economical for him to produce a system like this without going through the process, 5 years?
No. So these systems are not approved under the building code. They're designed for communal treatment. Yeah.
I think I saw a question in the second row. Yeah.
Just a very simple question.
So the question was, what is the track record for these systems?
Track record as far as output goes. Problems. Oh, I mean, these are machines. So obviously there's operation and maintenance requirements that have to happen. There is a operation and maintenance plan, replacement parts. These are good for about 7 to 10 years. So you have to accrue, you also have to remember these systems are utilities. So they're generating revenue from the homeowners, basically, for using water. No different they live in the city, you pay a water bill. So that water or that money that's being accrued is set aside. Some of it's set aside for replacement parts. Pumps will wear out over time. You have to replace the seals in the pumps every 3 years. And there's a whole regimented O&M. So to answer your question, what is a failure rate? It's dependent on the site. So there definitely, there's always fail points. And the whole purpose of having these systems with the redundancies and having all of the backups is to prevent and mitigate any of those issues. But you will have things break, so.
So the other benefit we have in Frontenac is the utility. So when I started this project and the planners in the area were starting to understand what we were doing, I got a phone call from one of my colleagues that said, I got one of these in my community that failed. So I was puzzled by that, but then I got more information about it. And the reason it failed, and Brad, you can add on to this, is because it wasn't being operated the right way. It was a campground, and they weren't maintaining it. They weren't following those rules that you have about maintaining it. But the fact that the utility here will be owning these systems and maintaining them is going to even reduce that risk even more. I don't know if you want to add anything.
No, that's exactly right. And I'd say the regulations around the reporting have gotten more strict over the years. So, I don't know how old that project was. That was almost 20 years ago or 15 years ago, but those situations are fairly rare now. Most, don't get me wrong, things happen, things break, power goes out, we have ice storms. So there's emergency plans that get activated, and then, the system gets rectified and back up and running. But it's about operation and maintenance. And when you have a utility company or you have an operator of record that is maintaining it and following the recommendations by the manufacturer, these systems run great. And there's many examples. There's 40 in Ontario that are good examples of that.
So the one thing that I was going to mention, because I've gotten questions about it before, but in terms of the cost and who is paying for what, and I think Joe had alluded to this, that when it comes to somebody building something new, say somebody wants to build a subdivision, the developer is responsible for paying all of the costs. So the township is not paying for the pipes in the system. The developer is responsible for paying all of the costs of installing the system, of installing the pipes, hooking everything up, and it's overseen by the public utility. And then once they know the system is working properly, it's turned over to the utility. And then the people who buy the homes in that subdivision, the utility will charge them a utility rate. So yes, you would get a monthly bill for water and sewer, just like you would if you were living in Kingston or Napanee. But you also then don't have to worry about taking care of a well or shelling out $40,000 to replace your entire septic system, because you don't have to worry about that anymore. And I know, Joe, when you were doing this research, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you did ask some people about costs for communal services, and it was about $150 a month for water and sewer, which some people, if you have a well and a septic and you're not paying any bill right now, other than say your water softener, that, might seem like a lot. But like I said, if you are on a septic system, you should probably be putting $150 a month away anyways to start saving up for replacing that septic system, because it's going to cost a lot when that comes around. So unless it's the township who wants to, and the community who decides they want to service existing properties and buildings, then yes, you're going to have to come to some kind of financial understanding as to how that's all going to come about. But when it's new development that's solely on this communal system, it's entirely on the developer to pay for everything to install it. And then, like Brad said, that monthly utility bill is to pay for the costs of the use and the treatment of everything, but also to start setting money aside to replace all of that infrastructure as it needs to be replaced during its lifetime. So that's what the utility will manage.
And just to add to that, we do have some holding tanks in the village, one being the church just down the hill, and our restaurant, the Belong restaurant, is on a holding tank. And that cost for the church, which is just a small tank, is like $350, and it gets pumped 2 or 3 times a year. So that's certainly a bigger cost than buying into the system at $150.
Yes, at the back? What that initial cost would be to a developer or to whoever takes on that responsibility. Because presumably, That's a fairly high threshold, and putting 5 units there probably wouldn't be cost effective. So some research must have been done about what that initial cost would be, and then the cost effectiveness for the developer might fall, what range. Okay, sorry, I'm going to have to stop you because that was a really long question. I now have to repeat it for the folks online. So you're asking about the costs, the
Cost system as well as all the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Pull water from one side of the lake. Put that
Uh,
on the other side.
Okay, so sorry, I'm about to repeat it. Then you let me know if it's right. So you want to know if there have been cost estimates done, and you're specifically asking about the former Charlotte Lake school site to install all of that infrastructure and the system to be able to pull water from one side and to output it in the other side. I'm trying to remember what was in the feasibility. We have not worked out all of those details. Those are parts of the technical studies that still need to be done for that site. And I'll have to say, we don't even know that if it's like, I think the initial idea was take it from one side and output in the other side. That may not be the ultimate solution that comes up with. So the environmental approvals process needed for that site is going to look at all the various options and the costing as well. So those details have not been done yet. No. Sally, can you use the microphone? Or do you want me to repeat it? Okay. So the question was, again, in relation to the Charlotte Lake school site, what is the minimum number of residential units that would be built to make it financially feasible for a developer? That's a good question. I mean, I know it can run on as little as 10, but there's a lot of factors and costs that go into development. So I think, again, that's something that the financials the township needs to look at in terms of the cost. Did anybody else want to add to that answer?
Yeah, not to the development specifically, but just more to the technology. The technology is designed that it can turn down its flow. So say the system was good for 30 homes, it can operate as low as about 5 or 6 homes. No, when you do the math based on 5 homes, so as you can imagine, as you get in more homes, the dollars per home go down.
Ongoing presumably wouldn't be very feasible for the monthly rate, right? It would be higher for smaller.
So the question was that if there were fewer homes, so that it wouldn't be economically feasible on an ongoing monthly basis either. And that is, again, I think something the utility is going to have to work out. I mean, for an ongoing rate, essentially the way utilities normally work is you pay a certain amount per volume that you use, and then that's equal across wherever you are for the utility. I mean, if you're in Kingston, you don't pay a different rate than what you do from the east end to the west end, but you pay a different rate based on the volume that you use. So that is something that the utility is still working on. But ideally, yes, if they were doing it as a pay per volume, you would want to spread it across. But I don't think that's our intent. Our intent is for the utility to be able to set one rate regardless. But again, if you're going to go to the extent of building this system, most developers are going to need to build a certain threshold number of units in order to actually make the whole project financially viable to do. Yes, those details are all still being worked out.
We've got to get a developer first.
I guess just Francis, confirm. So if Charlotte Lake is developed or done, like it is only at this point for the Charlotte Lake, the old public school site and a couple of buildings. It's not for the entire village of Charlotte Lake. Is that correct?
my understanding would be, it would be built for this particular build, but anybody else who wanted to join in could do it. The township could hook up this building. The church could get rid of their holding tank and go on this system. So it would, once it's built, you can add to it.
Okay, so my understanding, though, is there would be no impact to a taxpayer that is not a resident of or not involved in it. So an individual in Arden is not going to pay for the reconstruction in Charlotte Lake. Is that correct?
The developer will pay for it, and then the
They will
service
pay a monthly
corporation will
charge.
take over the running of it.
Okay.
And it's not on the municipal taxes, nor is the liability on the municipality. It's on the corporation.
Okay, so I'll switch topics now. My question is, reading a study that is on the county website called the projections. When I read it, I must say it brings tears to my eyes of the projections for Central Frontenac. It's saying that there is very little growth. It's going to be a declining population over the next 30 years. My question is, what has changed? So, I love the idea of having growth because it will change our tax base and solve many problems. But it seems unusual to anticipate a lot of growth in a community that, I'm going to say, hopscotches. So normally, if I look at any other area that's growing, it starts at the hub and comes out through the spokes. In GTA, it starts in Toronto, comes up to Steeles Avenue, goes to Richmond Hill, goes to Aurora, Newmarket. In our case, what is it that we think is going to bring growth? When I see projections of apartment buildings, townhouses, but we're still 50 or 60 miles from the employment center of Kingston. I guess the question that I sit there in the audience and listen to is, if we build it, will they come? Now, I'm thrilled to hear that we're not putting dollars out. There's no tax dollars for the developers, but have we had developers pounding on our door? I see Verona, that's not that far down the road. Are developers pounding on the door to do this? Or are we just kind of pie in the sky?
I guess the question is, has anybody looked for a place to rent in our community? Because there aren't any. If there are, they're $1,700, $1,800 a month for 1 and 2 bedrooms. We have people who cannot find places to live. So yes, there's a need. We also have seniors who move out of our community and go to the city to an apartment because they don't have an option of an apartment here that's affordable. So I do believe if we build it, they will come. And the other thing is we're growing probably at 25 to 30 houses a year that's going up. I go for drives on some of the roads out of the villages, and I can't believe the houses that have gone up. So we are growing very steadily and probably at a good rate. If we grow much faster, we've got lots of things we have to do to prepare for that.
So I believe that we are growing. I see it as well, Fran. But again, I go back to the study, which I'm sure we paid
What year was that?
So
January
As-
20th, 2020. So it's not
Yeah,
that long ago.
So the study you're referring to, just for everybody else's reference, is the population, housing, and employment projections that are done by the county for the whole county. It's a standard the issue that municipalities do these every 5 years, and they do them generally once we know that all the most recent census data has been released. So we actually just got approval from County Council last year to update that study because we're going to be updating our official plan. So we will be doing an updated study probably end of this year into next year. And I'm pretty certain based on what I've seen that those numbers are going to change. We have seen growth, especially since COVID, the world has changed in many ways, but certainly with COVID and people leaving urban areas to come and live in rural areas was a change that not predicted when that study was done.
Okay. No, and because in the study, it talks about 80% of the growth will be in South Frontenac with declining growth in Central Frontenac. So back to your point, Madam Mayor, yes, I see houses built, but again, it's supporting what was written in this, which says it's not in the hamlets, it's in the rural areas. And I don't see that a communal is necessarily going to help unless we can go onto a lake and build 10 homes or whatever, or a lodge or whatever. So,
Well, I think one of the things we'll do this time when we hire the economists to look at those projections is to tell them that we now have a utility that allows you to build on communal services, and we can now build in our hamlets and our villages in the way that we couldn't before. And I'm hoping that they will deliver us some different news and ideas about then what is possible for the
no, and
future.
I think that would be great. And I'll just, I guess, make one last comment because others want to speak. But, part of that then is doing the SWOT analysis to say, here are the strengths. Here's what it's going to mean to the taxpayer. Here's the opportunities. Here's the threats. And I believe that will help if individuals can see that it's going to change the constantly escalating tax base that is happening in Central Frontenac. If we can grow and if we can have a different picture in front of us than what this is portraying. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. I think there was a gentleman at the back too who wanted to ask a question. So the question was, with the reference to the high quality output from these systems, why is the water not then being reused elsewhere on the site? So like a gray water system for flushing toilets and whatnot. I'm going to let Brad handle that one.
Yeah, so the output is technically feasible to do that. We've done that in a number of situations where water is a bit more rare, particularly in northern Alberta. So we have remote communities where they actually haul in water. They use the water, the dirty water, then they have to haul it back out. So we put treatment systems in, minimize what they're hauling out, but also what they're reusing. So putting it through purple pipe, which allows them to flush toilets and that sort of thing. The infrastructure required to do that and the fees, and if you compare a cost analysis of that where you have water in a well that's already been, it's potable to the extent that maybe you have to put a UV on it. It just makes more sense to use that water. There's less permitting, there's less other issues.
Okay, so sorry, just 1 second. Abby is going to bring a mic to you because they just can't hear you online without it. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. So you mentioned the water that you're going to be using is coming from the lake. I think that was your comment. And so if you're treating lake water for domestic use, why can't you treat your effluent the same way for your same domestic use? Instead of just discharging that wastewater back into the East Basin.
So, you want me to talk to that?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just from a technical standpoint on the actual effluent or the output is yes, you can do that. But there's also environmental approval requirements for doing that. And certain areas are less interested in doing that. So you can get it. You could go through the permitting process and get that, but it would take more work, studies, and to prove that that's okay. And it's more based around it being reused for, like, it can be reused for reuse water that's not for drinking, to be clear. This does not produce drinking water unless you do another level of polishing. And even at doing that, there's permitting required for that. And that's not something that would be, seen as needed. So it wouldn't be approved.
All right, just so that you understand, that effluent that's going into the East Basin is our drinking water also, that we're using for our domestic use. my next question would be, in the case of the public school installation, why not have that wastewater put down into a leaching bed down by the train station site? So it doesn't go into the lake at all, any of your effluent.
So those certainly are possibilities, and that's something the environmental study would look at. So we haven't done the full environmental study for that site. So where we're going to get the water from and where the water is going to go to is still yet to actually be determined. But you're right. If part of the design for the Sharplet Lake School site were to want to take some of the gray water and reuse it in the building again for some reason, that's a design possibility and something that just would have to be considered as part of the approvals process.
All right, just on that same subject though, drawing the water from the West Basin, how would you contend with zebra mussel buildup on your water intake? Sort of like things like on Lake Ontario, I understand they use huge chlorination systems to mitigate zebra mussel and other wildlife buildup.
So the intake design would be done by the consultant engineer that's designing the wastewater plant. We don't design intake points, so I can't speak to that exactly what technology they're using there. But yeah, we would need a way to get that influent, like that clean water or that water in initially. Yeah.
Another question then. Your operator that would be operating that system, would he be on site? Or is that all computer controlled and controlled by alarm systems and so on?
No, so the operator has a minimum requirement of hours on site, typically 12 hours a week, that they need to be there. So they would be doing their routine work that's required by the ECA, but also required by the O&M of the equipment that's supplied. And so they would be doing all that documentation. In addition to that, there is communications to the plant at all times, 24/7.
Okay, we're closing in on the 7:30 mark, and I know we had promised to get people off home, but I see we've got another question at the back there. So Abby will share the mic with you.
A couple of questions. So this is strictly a wastewater system, but the whole concept behind it is that it can service multiple units, which brings density. But if that's the case for wastewater, what is the plan to service domestic water at that quantity? Because you're comparing this communal wastewater system to a personal septic system. Well, for those of us that have a septic system, we have a well that services our dwellings. So if you're going to bring in a communal wastewater system, how are you servicing that many residences or that many dwellings for water? Because presumably it's not a single well.
So on the drinking water side of things, I didn't touch on that technology tonight, but happy to do that anytime. So drinking water is regulated, again, very strictly by the Ministry of Environment. There is a drinking water standard that needs to be hit. There's technologies to go from whatever that source water is. It could be a well, it could be a communal well, it could be a lake, a river, as long as there's adequate flow and enough supply. That is all determined by the environmental assessment. And then from there, the system is designed based on the influent water and even considerations of seasonal flow, because sometimes you might have more algae or more organic growth in the spring or summer. So those things are all part of that study and consistency. And then it goes through a custom water treatment plant to treat that source water to produce the very strict effluent that's required for drinking water standards on communal systems.
Aren't we missing half the conversation because we can't have residential dwellings with just wastewater and no domestic, right? So from a cost perspective, we actually need two systems to run whatever these communities or dwellings are. You can't have one without the other, correct?
You can have individual wells that are per home. You can also have a communal system that does the treatment. So depending on the setting, the situation, we've had, where potable water is available by the local municipality. In this case, obviously not, but that sometimes is the situation. Other times it's wells per home. And then other times it's a communal well or some sort of drinking water system. But yes, you're correct. There's another half to this that is the drinking water side.
So I'm just going to add a little bit to that answer if I could. So on the provincial side, technically from a planning perspective, what Bryansby do is called partial services, right? So you have private services for water and public for the sewage or vice versa. And that generally is frowned upon now in terms of development. So I think what you're talking about is, yes, we focused on the wastewater tonight because we know that people are very concerned about the output and what that does to groundwater and lake water. But yes, so any development going forward, and this is a decision that the utility is going to have to make, but generally they would operate both a water treatment system for drinking and the wastewater treatment. So the water coming in comes in for the drinking water and is what comes out of the taps. And then the wastewater treatment is what is then going back out to wherever that output is going to be. So in all likelihood, you're right. There's two parts to the equation and they're working in tandem.
And then this MBR system, is it proprietary?
No, MBR is not proprietary. There's hundreds of membrane manufacturers. We chose the Veolia Z500S, which is this model, and only because we've been testing it for about 7 years, and it's the best performing membrane that we've found.
Question, you mentioned about how whoever's on the system will pay into it in terms of their monthly cost based on consumption, whatever measurement that is, cubic meters, square feet, whatever. But then you also mentioned that there's like an input into that for replacement costs built into it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so typically the water utility handles that calculation based on the water rate. So the service rate has, the ongoing operational costs, because remember that girl or guy has to go to site 12 hours a week, make those reports. So there's costs there, but then there's also that future costs of replacing the membranes every 7 to 10 years. So that's all built into the rate.
Does it like cost increase? Because from what you're saying.
Sorry, can we just wait? Sorry, can we wait for the mic? Sorry.
Yeah. So you said it's been around roughly what, 20 years, give or take?
The technology's been around since the 90s, yes.
And the service life being 40 years. So has it been proven that like the cost going in is enough to sustain the cost of a replacement, given that presumably that's going to increase significantly over time?
Sorry, the plant has a service life of roughly 35, 40 years. And that really comes down to the building structure itself, how well it's maintained, lots of variables that go into that, no different than your home. So the life of the equipment has a mean time before failure that's indicated by the manufacturer. For example, a pump has a life to it. That's all taken into the calculation based on what the accrual costs will need to be set aside for the rate. So to say that the rate would never go up would be incorrect, because we have inflation. So that is obviously going to be built into those rates as time goes on.
Thanks. Sonia, I wanted to ask about the approval process kind of locally. So if there's a development that comes that wants to look at doing a development, does that sit with the new service board to say that it's feasible, or is it still the municipality and the county that says, no, that's the development we want in that area, and servicing this is an option that the corporation can look at? Because then part two of that would be, if you do a 20 lot development and only 5 homes get built, is the service corporation then running at a loss trying to look after those homes until it's fully built out? Because it could take a while for some of those lots to get built out.
Yeah. So I guess to answer the first part of the question, the decision on development in terms of like planning applications if it's been a township decision, it's still a township decision. The public utility, so Frontenac Municipal Services, the intent is they would be treated like another agency, right? So if somebody is interested in developing on Communal, then we want a representative from the utility company to come to the pre-application meeting, to meet with the developer, to explain to them what's possible, what the regulations are, how the process would work. But ultimately, the decision on the development would still be the townships. Now, with respect to the second part of the question, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Ultimately, the development is still up to the developer to build out. And I think what would happen, and Joe, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, because the utility is still sort of figuring out these details, but if you're building 20 homes, then you're actually coming to the county right now for approval for what's called a plan of subdivision. And we would have within that subdivision agreement clauses that talk about when the public utility takes over those systems. And if there's supposed to be 20 homes and there's only 5, then the developer is going to continue to own and need to take care of that system until they've built it out. So they're going to have to do their cost benefit analysis very closely, because the utility is not going to take on something and then be the developer and try and find people or homes to be built on these lots. That's not what the utility is here for.
So now I have a question about the Charlotte Lake site specifically, because I know a lot of people are worried about what could potentially happen to Charlotte Lake. So I guess in your system, I don't think we got a good answer on what is the fail-safe to ensure that nothing happens if we're discharging back into the lake, because I think we only get to mess that up once.
So I'm going to answer, and then Brad, you can tell me if I got this right or not. So my understanding is that everything that Brad talked about, if absolutely everything failed, that nothing would go out to the lake or a septic bed or wherever that output is designed to be. It would go into a holding tank. And it then, I mean, how quickly, 5 hours, you would have somebody on site probably? There would have to be regularly, it would have to be fixed, and then it would have to be up and running again, and the holding tank would have to be pumped. But it would shut itself down. It would not output to wherever the output is, whether it's one of the basins of the lake, whether it's a wetland somewhere, whether it's a septic bed. It just would shut down and it would divert to a holding tank.
That is correct, yeah. So exactly what you said. So it gets held away is the only option. So it can't go through the membrane because the plant's down. Then trucks have to come in and remove the sewage.
Yeah, you hear, I know people have heard horror stories about like in cities. So for instance, in Kingston, there's a lot of areas in the downtown of Kingston that still have what are called combined sewers. So that's where your wastewater and your stormwater actually get combined into the same pipe. And when you have a major rain event, it overwhelms it and stuff gets dumped out into the river. So there's nothing combined here. There's no way for it to get where it's supposed to go if it's not running through the system properly. The system shuts down and it diverts to a holding tank. There's one at the back and then the gentleman in the white.
Thank you. And I apologize if this was answered at the presentation because I was late getting here. But for the Charlotte Lake site specifically, has an environmental assessment process started yet? And what is the cost of that and who will bear that cost? Will that be a municipal cost or will that be borne by a utility or developer?
So to answer, so the environmental assessment process has not started yet. And again, that's something the township is going to have to decide on as a council, that the environmental assessment process right now is unfortunately very, very lengthy. So it's actually to the benefit to get started sooner rather than later, and then perhaps recoup costs from a developer. But I know right now we're actively looking at funding applications like grants to help pay for it so that it is not something that the township is paying completely out of pocket for.
Thank you, Sonia. My question is, towards the end of your presentation, you talked about getting public input so that the council can decide where we would like to put, if and where we would like to put communal services. What are the next steps? So how can people be able to give their feedback going forward?
That's a great segue. Thank you, Councillor Gowdy. So this is really just sort of the first part of the conversation in terms of what's going to happen with the official plan. In terms of this conversation, if you want to reach out in the interim, I've left my business card over there, as well as I think Brad has left his as well. But if you talk to him about the official plan, he's only going to send it to me. So there's also the Engage Frontenac site has like a question and answer function discussion on it as well if you have questions you want to submit, or you can email me directly. But I think in terms of a next step, what we are going to do is we're going to go away and we need to come up with sort of a draft set of policies. Because I think a lot of people, like I could ask you here tonight, what does everybody want? And you're kind of like, I don't really know because I'm not a planner and I don't write planning stuff. And that's completely fair. So I think what we would do is come up with a set of policies that would address all of those bullet points that I told, all the various scenarios. And then what we would do is we would then publish that and have a public meeting. And so it would be published well in advance of the public meeting. People could look at what the proposed policies are. We could have another meeting like this where I could say, okay, this is why I wrote this. What does everybody think? And we would accept feedback in terms of how that would work for the various areas. So that's probably our next step, is to have that public meeting.
And just to add to that, whatever you put on Engage Frontenac, we need the same thing that we can put on our website as well.
Yeah, and so we'll certainly share that with the township, yeah. The gentleman in the white, I think Abby had another question. Oh, one at the back and then.
Hi, just a follow-up question to the questions around failure of the plant. I know we've been talking specifically about failures within the plant, but the plant is part of a system which includes the piping, et cetera, to get the effluent to the plant. So my questions are around, failures of that infrastructure. Will there be any monitoring of the quality of the water in Charlotte Lake? Because if there is failure in that infrastructure to get to the plant, the water tables within the area are connected to Charlotte Lake and all the aquifers that also supply the various wells in the area that would be serviced by the communal services. So are there plans in place to test the water quality to ensure that, there potentially could be a failure within the infrastructure? And the second part of that question is, who owns that infrastructure? Is that infrastructure, the piping, et cetera, owned by the utility, or is it owned by the township?
Did you want to answer the pipe question first?
Sure. So the conveyance system, or pipe collection system, is typically installed close. These are new developments, so they're not tied in with stormwater, so they are closed pipe. But monitoring is determined by the Ministry of Environment. So the environmental assessment would determine, the feasibility of the collection system. They'll be all part of that. The technology as far as how the water's being treated, and the output, and then what other fail safes need to be put in. That'll be all controlled by the Ministry of Environment, and they have that say. So if they want monitoring of the lake, then that gets put on.
So, and I think in terms of the ownership of the pipes, I mean, that is something that would have to be worked out with the municipality, the developer, and the utility company, right? And if it's something that the utility company is going to own, then there are legal mechanisms like an easement, right? If we had to cross a property or something in order to get to wherever the output goes. So I can't give you one sole answer because it's going to depend on the site and how it's all going to work. But that gets all worked out into whatever agreements go on the site.
Although just to add to that, the corporation right now is talking about who would own those pipes, and we're leaning towards the fact that that should belong to the Municipal Service Corporation. It's part of a system instead of it belonging to the municipality.
Sorry, the gentleman in white behind you has been waiting for a while.
Thank you. Brad, I'm going to start with yourself on this one. We are hearing throughout the news of a lot of efforts by both the Conservative government of Ontario and the recent Mark Carney election that there is going to be considerable pressure to build homes. So I'm wondering, are you aware anywhere in Ontario where we've been able to use your systems to get some dollars out of either the federal or the provincial governments to get this going and to be able to build homes quicker and stay online with the politicians?
That's a great question. A long one for an answer, but just to say that the current structure of our province is centralized, and a lot of the dollars, I think there was 1.54 billion that was billion that was given out in grants to municipalities. There were some rules around that. You had to have an existing facility. There was, I don't know all the details because I wasn't applying for those grants, but that's some of the information I got back from some of the mayors and councillors. But essentially, a lot of that money went to centralized infrastructure. So pipe expansions, plant expansions, and not decentralized. So from a decentralized standpoint, you know, it's been a bit of an uphill battle for the last 20 years, to be honest, as far as, you know, we have 40 systems in Ontario. And it's taken us 20 years to do that because of the regulatory process. And most of those are all bought by developers, not public money. And in the US, for example, in Colorado, one area of Colorado in the last 2 years have installed 18 systems. So the US, I don't like to say it, but they're a bit more advanced in the decentralized component of being able to treat water. They've been doing it for decades. They're actually at the point where they're replacing systems that are end of life, that they've been doing it that long. So Ontario's money has been centralized publicly.
So I guess the question then becomes to the county and to our council, is there an opportunity to be a leader, to go to our member of parliament and our MPP and say, we would like to grow. Can you guys jump in? Mark County wants to do a wartime type of building. Do we have the infrastructure? Can we get this done?
Joe or Fran, do you want to talk about what's been?
I'll just mention that we have been to the Ministry of Environment probably Joe's probably been there 7, 8 times. I've been there about 5 times, where we talk to the ministers and tell them we need help. This EA is going to kill us and all this stuff. And so far, they nod their heads, they smile. It looks like we got somewhere. But when we get back home, no letters come to say that they have understood and are prepared to work with us. But we're not giving up. We're still going to be doing that. Right, Joe?
Yeah. Your municipal leaders have been very active in this, communicating to provincial MPPs, look, you want more housing built? We've got a solution for building different forms of housing in rural Eastern Ontario that the model that we've come up with in Frontenac is easily transferable to other jurisdictions. We want you to help us invest in this. And I think there's been requests to actually have monies from the province to help the utility or to help fund these projects. I can tell you that South Frontenac made an application for the housing money that Brad mentioned. It was a perfect situation in terms of they had all their ducks lined up, but they weren't successful. And the mayor of South Frontenac has reached out to the MPP and said, you got to explain this to us because we're trying to help you build the housing supply. We've got the perfect solution to build different forms of rural housing. We need you to recognize this and fund it. So, I mean, I do congratulate our councillors for pushing.
I think at this point, we're about 15 minutes past when we said we would end. So I do want to wrap up so that people can go home. And Abby's going to have to, I think, shut things down online. But we will stay behind. If you have more questions, please feel free to stay and chat with us. But just in general, thank you for taking the time to come out and speak with us tonight, and to for those that joined online. As I said, please, if you're interested in learning more or participating in the next steps, make sure you leave your name and your email address or your mailing address before you leave, so that we can get in touch with you. And certainly, all the slides you saw tonight will be put up as a PDF, and we'll also send out the link to the YouTube video if you want to share it with all of your friends or watch it again. So, thank you again.